it seemed to make a lot of sense to me because it was much more of a holistic approach to learning and education rather than, something very tactical and specific. And that just really resonated with me. And it made a lot of sense to me too, going with an approach where, you're offering a lot of content to your learners. You're offering diverse content, and you're not forcing them to consume any of that content, right? It's really up to the learner to decide what he or she wants to consume and what resonates with him or her. So to me, that was a really great approach to how we wanted to start our program. And so we went with it. We wanted a place to start, just a framework for ourselves to keep in mind as we built the program. So, I felt really comfortable taking John with me to the workshop, knowing that it wasn't going to be this one-off type of workshop. It was going to be more of a, hey, let's take this as a foundation, a baseline, and then from there we can build our program. I really was struggling with being sick, but I really also wanted to attend. So that was, I guess, memorable in its own right. But what I remember very vividly from being a part of this group of educators and L&D folks is the fact that a lot of people were talking about, things that would happen 3 months after the workshop, 6 months, even 2 years after they attended the workshop. But for us, we were thinking like, we want something to happen now or at least next week. And so what stood out to me was this immediate impact that we wanted from the workshop and the impact that it ended up providing us versus, again, just consuming information and, taking months of time just to internalize it and think about it and then perhaps doing something. So I was really glad that everything that Crystal and Lisa offered was something that we could immediately implement within our program, virtually the next day. Yeah, I think kind of framing L&D in terms of multiple assets and diverse assets was really a good concept for me to think about because, sometimes you get focused and you think to yourself, well, I have to build a lesson, I have to build a course, or I have to create a PDF of something as a job aid, but you never really think from the perspective of, well, perhaps I should do all of the above and then give my learner the freedom to learn, the freedom to choose versus trying to shove something down someone's throat, which to me is a sort of a side effect of our educational system in many ways. So I guess me and the rest of the folks I was talking to, we sort of all grew up with the mentality that, you're on this path and you're given this book or this text book or something, and you read it, you learn, and you kind of move on. But this was definitely a much more modern approach to that industrial sort of learning process. So over the course of those 2 days, we created a plan of sorts, right? Just based off the model that Crystal and Lisa were helping us with. I actually walked away with that poster board or that, I guess, what do you call those things that you put on an easel and you kind of tape to the wall? I have it, actually. It's here in my home office. I've kept it. Actually, my coworker, John, kept it, and he gave it to me as like a holiday present last year to demonstrate how far we'd come. So I literally kept that asset, that entity with me, and I still have it to this day. And so that was by far the most valuable thing that came out of that 2-day workshop. Yeah, he kept it for a year, knowing that at a certain point he'd give it to me. And I had totally forgotten that he had actually kept it purposefully. And so during our holiday dinner this last Christmas, he gave it to me as a gift. Well, I started as a team of 1. I brought John on board, so we became 2. And during the holiday dinner, we were at that point, I think, a team of 5, which, it doesn't sound that large, but it went from 1 to 5, which is significant. And now we're a team of 10. And so, it's definitely grown over the last couple of years. I wouldn't say it really changed. Fundamentally, I think it became something because of that model. That was the source of the entire development of the program, because we really started with nothing. We started with some audacious ideas and hopes, but that was really it. And so it really was the foundational piece that we needed to really build upon. Yeah, actually, a lot of small wins that came one right after another. We started with a learning management system online, so we started building courses, video courses, right? And then we got into more written, dynamic courses with video that was integrated into the courses themselves. And then we started a video program. So these were all the parts and pieces that we had talked about with Crystal and Lisa, having these diverse assets that really help during certain moments, or that help by delivering certain requirements. So, we had video, we had written content, we had instructional content, we had just PDFs that you can just download and place onto your machine. So all of that combined, all those little developments that happened one after another combined to form the cluster, the set of assets that we needed to complete the actual model itself. We've had a lot of success because we now serve a much wider audience of learners, because we have so much diverse content and so many different mediums with which to deliver that content. So that's been huge, because working with enterprise companies now, there's tens of thousands of people, and all those people learn differently. So I'm really glad we have a model which delivers content that resonates with most learners out there. When we began, we had an idea of what type of personas, what type of people were using our products, but as soon as we narrowed them down into, I think it was 3 or 4 different personas, we started building content against those personas. And that has evolved into, different types of content over time. But it was a great way to start, because it helped us mentally break down what it is that a basic sort of user needs versus someone who has a very specific goal in mind with our product, versus someone who needs to know everything under the sun about our product, because that person may be an administrator or some sort of professional who either gives out or doles out the licenses, or has to answer questions because they're sort of like the first line of defense for their own user base. Yeah, my advice to leaders who are implementing this model for the first time, or who are beginning the journey using this model, is to not boil the ocean, or not try to boil the ocean with your content, right? I would say focus on one specific type of content out of the collection of assets, or the collection of ideas. Get really good with that specific type of medium, and then move on to the next and the next. And you'll find that as you start creating different types of assets, you'll have to recruit different type of skill sets, and maybe hire someone who has video skills versus the other person who was a technical writer. And so it's a good way to scale the team as well, because you're creating content, you're sort of pushing the boundaries, and then you're hiring to accommodate that new need. And it's just very natural in terms of growing the team. And in many ways, it organically grows, because you're not making requirements up. You're actually creating requirements out of the work that you're doing. So it's a very fluid process, which I have definitely enjoyed over the last couple of years. John and I are neither videographers nor instructional designers. What we were doing was we were training folks in person. So, obviously you need some sort of methodology behind all that, but it was more intuition based, right? You ask the customer what they need, you show up on site, deliver the training, answer questions, And it's not scalable, obviously, and it doesn't need to be because there are one-off training sessions. But when you're talking about going from tens of customers to thousands or tens of thousands, then you need a much more scalable process. And that's when we asked ourselves, what are we good at building? So we figured, okay, we can do screen captures, video captures of our software. So we started making 60-second clips on how to use the software. And then we got to the point where we asked ourselves, are we really that good at instructional design, or do we need someone to come in and design our content? And that was the point where we hired an instructional designer. So he started architecting the infrastructure for all this content. And then next thing you know, we needed a couple people to create content because we knew what we needed. We just needed to start producing, and we needed the machine to start working. So we hired a training coordinator, since she started producing content on a weekly basis. And then we asked ourselves, oh, how's our video content? It wasn't that great, so we hired a videographer to create video content. And then we asked ourselves, do we have a good enough knowledge base for just answering quick questions? And we didn't. So we inherited a couple of tech writers. And so that's sort of how the team has been built. And it's always been because we've always been asking ourselves, what's next? What else do we need to do to help our learners along? And how do we build that content? And if we can't build it, who's going to help us build that content? If the whole world adopted this model, this sort of foundational way of looking at training, first of all, learning would happen a lot faster because, we're leveraging, as part of this model, we're leveraging technology and tools and platforms that were made to share content with the rest of the world and quickly do it, right? And especially in today's world where we're all at home essentially and learning virtually. If all of a sudden the whole L&D industry adopted this model, then guess what? Like, everybody would be learning, and learning would be so much more efficient and so much more enjoyable, because now you're not talking about a teacher trying to adjust to virtual learning and potentially putting a PDF on a site where a student needs to download that PDF and read it. That would be just one of the many ways of getting that information across, right? There could be webinars and video recordings and online courses, and it would make the learning experience so much more diverse and so much more dynamic. And even for my kids who are going through this process with their elementary schools, gosh, if the teachers and the schools had this model going and they were operating according to the model, we wouldn't have to spend all this time sitting next to them, helping them with their homework. And they'd actually be learning using the assets and the content that the teachers are providing. So that would be my perfect scenario. And there's so many ways these days to share information and to share content. And I sort of cringe when I'm asked to create something that's just static. And I know that's part of the model, obviously, because there are people out there that, they prefer reading. They prefer a static PDF document because that's sort of like their security blanket as it pertains to learning. And there's nothing wrong with providing that, but it shouldn't be the only resource that's provided, because, there are folks who prefer watching videos that could be 20, 30 minutes long. They might not even care about the length of the video. That's just how they happen to learn. Perhaps an unrealized benefit of this model is you're naturally sort of switching your mind around so that you're accommodating the person on the other end at all times, versus going with what you enjoy or what you like or what you think is right. Because at the end of the day, what's right is what helps the learner learn, not what you think is right. Like I tell my team all the time, it doesn't matter what we think, it's what our customers think. So if you're new, or if you're looking for a new way to create a learning team, looking at the LCD model, even if you happen to not use it in the future or not really leverage it as your model, what it does is it opens up your mind to this new way of creating learning content and this new way of interacting with folks, where you're being empathetic to them because you're making sure that they have what they need. You're being much more efficient with your work because you're thinking about things or thinking about assets that serve specific purposes that help you achieve specific goals. So when you're creating this content, it's with the intention of actually creating something that's going to lead to the achievement of a goal. And for any business, for any person out there doing any sort of work, I mean, I think that streamlines your process, your attainment, or it streamlines your ability to achieve goals in a way where you might not even think about the fact that you're trying to meet multiple goals as you create the content, but it's actually taking you there. It's sort of organically helping you achieve these goals. And anyone who's in the business world knows that it's about the goals and the metrics and the numbers at the end of the day if you're trying to be a profitable and a successful business. The dividends that were realized by spending money on the workshop were huge. Our organization at large definitely benefited from the two of us joining Crystal and Lisa in the workshop. And, kind of thinking about it now, I'm not sure if we'd even be here today talking had it not been for that amount of money spent. And if you think about it, you're spending money to be in this workshop with obviously Crystal and Lisa, but what you're also paying for is the ability to be part of a group of other L&D professionals, and you're learning from them. And these are people that are just as dedicated as you are because they're willing to spend the same type of money to be in this workshop. So you find yourself around these really interesting, like-minded people who happen to be professionals in the L&D space too. So that in itself is invaluable. What they shared or the things that they spoke about, we think about those things every day. And if it's something that, we need to remind ourselves of or be happy about, in the case of one lady, she says, hey, these are all great ideas, but it's going to take me, 2 years to implement some of these ideas where I work. And John and I laugh about that all the time because it takes us a week, to do the same thing that would have taken her 2 days or 2 years. So the information from the workshop doesn't just go away. I mean, it becomes part of your DNA, your program's DNA. And in that sense, it's I guess a gift that keeps on giving, right? Because you learn about it, you pass it on, you implement it, you imbue it into your culture, and that it just remains as part of your learning culture. So, hey, definitely worth a couple of thousands of bucks. Yeah, if you're interested in the LCD model, especially in today's world, I think you've got to do it because, we're moving as a society into a very modern type of learning environment. And we're moving into folks who grew up, with YouTube, with Netflix, and folks who learn through different mediums, through the internet, through apps on their phone, through text messages. I mean, people learn in very different ways now, and it's essential to really keep up with the times and have a model that allows you to keep up with the times, because I just don't think the traditional method of providing learning is applicable anymore. And if that's what you're doing, then I think you really have to think twice about what is it that you're doing, whether or not it's appropriate, and then finding yourself in a LCD workshop where you're actually getting the modern version of that model that applies in 2020 and beyond. So those would be my words of wisdom.